Hey everyone, Stacks here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. And Xmen number 4 is finally here. As soon as I saw this image, I was excited for it. You got the big three, Apocalypse, Magneto, and Professor X, sporting these amazing suits. The big man back there in the big suit, looking like a complete boss. And guys, this issue is really good, and it does it in some ways that are very tied back into House of X and Powers of X, and the way that Professor X is thinking, the way that he's always thought, and you get a glimmer of the old Professor X in this. However, you get that old Professor X with this new assuredness, this new confidence, and this new almost a father-like discipline, in that I love you, but don't screw this up kind of thing. And I'll get that more in a little bit. But you got, of course, Jonathan Hickman writing this, Leinil Francis Yu on art, and Sonny Go as your color artist. And getting into the issue, what you have is you have this big international conference of world leaders that's happening in Davos, Switzerland. And with all this instability that the mutants have caused with the island nation of Krakoa, with the mutant nation of Krakoa, and standing everything up and having basically turning the economy on its head to a degree, but not just the economic issues that tie into this, but also this new, you have all these powerful mutants now, which is a huge threat to other nations if they decide they want to be. And like it or not, when you have something, when you have a threat of that level, you have to be able to, in some degree, be able to defend yourself against it. But as the big three arrive here, Magneto, Apocalypse, and Professor X, you have their security detail, which consists of Cyclops and Gorgon. And if you're not familiar with Gorgon, his name's Tommy Shishido. He's from the Wolverine storyline back in the day. He fought with Wolverine a lot, and but he's got a healing factor. He's expert hand-to-hand combat, swordsman, and extremely intelligent. And if you go back to the Dark Avengers storyline, his power set lines up to the point where he was actually the Dark Wolverine. Anyways, him and Cyclops are the personnel security detachment for the big three. And as they walk in, they're told, look, understand that you guys, you two, your security attachment, are not going to be able to go in the meeting. That's everybody. I hope you understand. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. We'll sit out here and, be on our best behavior. As the three go in, this guy, the head security individual, says, hey, we're actually going to have to take your swords. You can't be we're all armed, obviously, but something that brazen can't be out in the open. It's a bad look, basically. And Gorgon just looks at him and says, the problem is that you look at me and think the blade is the weapon. But before things can get too heated, Cyclops pops in and says, hey, but bit of advice, friend. I'd let this one go, but don't worry, we're going to be on our best behavior. Now, interesting enough, after all the issues that happened back in X-Force number 1 with the assassination of Charles Xavier, how they slipped a tracking device inside one of his drinks, you find out the first thing as they go back is say, hey, because of the time of day that you showed up, we took the liberty of arranging for a meal. But they walk in and they basically begin with introductions, which you couldn't get a more hilarious introduction at this point than this little dude walking up. He's probably my size, I don't know. But talking to Apocalypse after he introduces himself to Magneto and Professor X, and he's, just to clarify, asks, and thanks to you as well, should I call you Insaba or Mr. Nur, perhaps? And he looks down at him, Apocalypse does, and says, I am Apocalypse. My other names are not fit for you to utter. And this guy just kind of raises his glass and goes, Apocalypse it is. Then, regards, welcome. But following that, they all toast to peace. And it's at that point that you have a guy that basically complaining about something itches. And it becomes really quick, really obvious he's some part of security or some kind of strike team. Well, as soon as this goes down, he gets jumped on right away by one of the other guys that's here with him and says, "What are you doing? Don't touch that. It's the only thing keeping them out of our hedge. You didn't break skin contact, did you? Tell me you didn't break skin contact." He's like, No, I don't think so. But at that point, Professor X raises a hand and says, and starts talking telepathically to Scott and telling him, "Hey, you got an assault team waiting to converge on our position. One's located the floor above us and one below us, so they're shielded again. So that's all the help I can offer. But be a good boy and take it from here." At this point, Cyclops and Gorgon both look over at this head of the security detail. Cyclops looking like he needs some chapstick, and tells him, "Hey, remember what I said about being on our best behavior? Back in the meeting, the speech that Magneto gives is, it is absolutely amazing. It is so in character. It is Magneto Prime. It is outstanding. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I'll hit on some high points of it. They talk to him about, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Just the way that you're handling things, it's destabilizing a lot of stuff. The changes already that have occurred within 30 days or whatever it is are staggering. What is your end game?" And they're like, "We've been really clear about this from the get-go. There's no subterfuge going on here, no lack of clarity. We've told you exactly what we're doing." And the delegate from Wakanda seems to be one of the most understanding here, because he's like, "Look, I understand what y'all are doing. We do the same thing. We work angles basically to benefit our countries. You're doing the same. You're just not doing it from the angle of being coy about it." Now, as Cyclops goes and starts taking care of business, the conversation inside the room swings to drugs, and some of the scientists are saying that that these drugs are not required on a weekly basis, and they go into a discussion that they are required. You don't know this yet because you haven't had enough time to study it. And basically the accusation here is that, look, you're selling us too many of these drugs. You're giving people more than they actually need in order to heal what ails them. And Magneto responds, "Look, if we're choosing to deliver it in the most economically beneficial way for Krakoa, it's something that we've learned from you." And what follows is a bit of an anti-capitalist speech about how armaments, universal debt, and planned obsolescence are these not the three pillars of Western prosperity. And these guys actually have the disdain to the point that they get onto Magneto for quoting a human author, Aldous Huxley, about Western prosperity. And this guy actually says, "I find it mildly amusing that you make your point, you have to quote a human author." This smug jerk is like, "Then again, there aren't any famous mutant authors, are there?" He's like, and Magneto just gives him this look and says, "Not yet, but there will be. After all, it's in the air lately, the breaking of human norms." But think about that. The idea that you can't quote a fact or an observation because somebody is essentially of a different race than you. That's absolutely absurd. From there, the conversation goes an interesting route into the circular nature of the destruction of civilization for mankind. And the example that Magneto brings up is how medieval societies got led, and that they had to actually go and mine it from Roman ruins because the technology, the knowledge of how to do it, was lost during the Dark Ages. But as Magneto talks, he mentions the Bronze Age and says that at the end of it, a Dark Age before the Dark Ages, you don't even know what caused the end of the Bronze Age, yet another hole in your collective memory as mankind. Then, with one of the best lines of this book, this jerk kind of sitting there looking at his watch, goes, "Who cares what caused the end of the Bronze Age?" And Apocalypse speaks up and says, "I was alive then, and you should care." And this other dude is like, "Is that so? Can you tell us what caused the collapse?" And Apocalypse just looks up and says, "Me." And I about fell out of my chair when I read that, because it was just incredibly perfect. From there, we get into a discussion of war. That all this posturing, it only leads to one thing. It always does, and that is war. And yet another conflict between mutants and humans. It's going to be catastrophic. And that's when Magneto lays out the entire plan for mutantdom and says, no, there will be no war. Basically, I'm going to suffocate you guys slowly. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to use the weapons of finance against you. We're going to use the weapons of influence against you. And we're going to use that as leverage. And basically, we're going to leverage people with debt, make them pay to be healthy and whole, and then we're going to make them pay to be educated. If they want a place to live, they're going to have to pay interest on that. Everything that basically the Western civilization and capitalism has done, we're going to do it, but better. We're going to have better drugs. We're going to have longer, healthier existences. You're going to give us your money because it's also going to mean more wealth for you. And then we're going to buy your banks. We're going to buy your schools. We're going to buy your media. We're going to buy your politicians. And then once we've bought all of that, we're going to buy you because you've taught us that everything has a price and we are happy to pay. And then once we've done all that, we're going to ensure that we control these institutions. We keep the people we want in these institutions in them, and the people that we want out, we make sure they stay out, because that's how you do it. That's how you influence these things. It's basically, when you look at this, it is very similar to the Communist Manifesto in a way of influencing institutions, slowly taking them over, and all that stuff. But he goes on to say that this is like a fire with no oxygen. You're basically slowly going to die out, and that there will be people there that hate them, but in the end, they won't have the means to do anything about it. And everybody in this conference just looks at him aghast, and it's like, he just laid out everything he is going to do to us. Down in the on the floor below and the floor above, Cyclops and Gorgon have handled the work. Both these strike teams have been disabled. Gorgon actually went a step further in his, and he's a swordsman that can't kill. Well, he has dismembered these dudes. If they were on the strike team, they're now missing a limb, and he sits there and tells them, typically I would have taken your head, but these days, because of some brilliant mutants who understand war better than I ever could, I've seen the errors in my ways, and now I am enlightened. Now go and live with the shame of what you are. Embrace this mercy, human, and never test my kind again. Like, dang! Eventually, Magneto calls everybody out on the strike team, especially the American ambassador here, and tells them, look, they're not coming. Things didn't go as you'd planned. They've basically been eliminated. And the American ambassador loses a little bit here. And it's like, did you guys not hear what he just said? He gave you the roadmap to what he's going to do to take over the world, basically. And during this, he actually says, how we can't trust them. How long do you think it is until someone blinks and this peaceful existence just disappears? And Professor X says a month. And he's like, what are you talking about? 1 month. That's all it took for someone to send someone to Krakoa to kill me. It was unsuccessful, obviously. And he actually tells him, look, I cannot be killed, not like that, and not by the likes of you. And the American ambassador immediately says, look, we didn't send anyone to kill you. And Magneto just kind of rolls his eyes. But then Professor Xavier does something that we hadn't seen throughout Pox and now Dawn of X. And he actually removes Cerebro and says, do you think I've completely given up on my dream of mutants and humans coexisting peacefully? And he tells him, basically that fatherly love almost, says, do you think I don't love you? Because I do, and I do want you to always remember that. But basically from there, he lays down the discipline. He goes on from there to say, I was once told I was dreaming the wrong dream. Of course, referring to Moira McTaggart telling him that back in House of X and Powers of X. But he also tells him, a small part of me will never stop believing in that dream. That part of me will never stop believing in you. But he cocks his head to the side and says, but it only took 1 month before you tried to kill me. And you were going to try again today, weren't you? You, and the ambassador from America is like, look, you basically admitted to everyone here today, you see the world as yours. What do you think we're going to do? We're just going to roll over? And Charles tells him, evolve, adapt, become something more. the same way I always have. If you want to be angry, if you want to lash out because we are claiming what is rightfully ours, then so be it. Just know it's the last time it ends like this. And one of the delegates says, well, what's that supposed to mean? And Magneto makes it very clear. Try us again if you will, but if you do, expect a response. And that's it, guys. That's the end of X-Men number 4, and there was just enough action in this to keep you interested, but I really enjoyed the political, the worldwide implications of Krakoa and how it is creating worldwide turmoil and how they're having to deal with that across all these different avenues. I mean, of course, you have the assassination attempts, but they have this plan ultimately to take over the existing systems, to control world governments, to control institutions, to control everything. And that's kind of scary. I mean, I will say that I guess my problem that's developing here is just because you're more powerful and you can do all these things does not mean you're doing what is morally right. I think you walk away from this where at walking away from this table, yeah, they're saying, look, if you come and try to hurt us again, if you attack us again, we're going to respond. And that's fair. And that's absolutely fair. Don't think I'm speaking against that. But the overall plan and strategy of basically we're going to take all your systems over, all your institutions over, and then we're going to silence those that think different from us, that's scary. I mean, that should let you know that the X-Men are not the good guys here. Neither are the humans. There is no good guy in this book right now. You have two extremes that are going to tear each other apart. And maybe that's the lesson from this whole thing, is that if you have two extremes, there is no middle ground, you're going to head for a war. The only glimmer of hope here is when Charles says, look, in my heart, I still have a place for you. I still love you. I still hope that you will do better. But in order to do that, they're going to have to establish some human allies. They're going to have to reach out to somebody and build that bond. Because if they don't, they're going to keep tearing in opposite directions and rip the world in half, and there will either be mutants or humans left, one or the other. Anyways, guys, I thought this was a very interesting book. Definitely a recommend. Go pick it up. It's just a very interesting read, and I've read it twice now, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed what Jonathan Hickman's doing here. Kind of like with back in number 3, where he had the horticulture part. He actually introduced some real live issues that manufacturing companies are doing as far as food manufacturers with seeds where they don't germinate now. In my last video, I think I gave the example of a tomato, but you can go check that out if you're interested. Anyways, something I did miss earlier on one of the white pages is that Gorgon is basically the executive PSD for the big 3. Anytime one of them goes somewhere, they're going to have him with them. Anyways, guys, I've rambled on long enough. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and of course comment down below. And guys, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. That's all I got. Real Comic Attacks out.